Picture two people standing on a map of the world. One lives in Qatar, the other lives in Nigeria. The first emits more carbon dioxide in a single week than the second does in a whole year. Now, when we ask who pollutes the most, we think we want one answer. But there are two answers, and they point at completely different countries. That gap is the whole story. So let's follow the carbon and watch who it actually blames. Start with the obvious answer. The biggest total emitter on Earth is China. In 2023, China released about 13 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That is roughly a third of everything humanity put into the sky that year. No country has ever burned fossil fuels at this scale. China is the factory floor of the planet, and the smoke rises accordingly. So if you want the single largest chimney, you have found it. But here's the thing, 4 billion people. Spread those emissions across all of them, and each person accounts for about 9 tons a year. That is more than the world average, yes. It is not, however, the act of a uniquely greedy nation. It is a vast country doing ordinary things, multiplied by an enormous crowd. Hold that thought. The crowd is about to matter. Now look at the United States. 7 billion tons a year. That is roughly 12% of the world's carbon, second only to China. A large number. But divide it by 30 million Americans, and the figure tells a sharper truth. Each American emits about 14 tons a year. That is nearly double the figure for a person in China. The American doesn't run a factory for the world. The American simply lives large, and the carbon follows the lifestyle. So already the league table has split in two. By total, China leads. By head, the Americans pull ahead, and neither of them is the real champion. Meet Qatar. Qatar is a small country sitting on an ocean of natural gas. Its total emissions barely register on the world map, but measured per person, Qatar is the most carbon-intensive place on the planet. Each resident accounts for around 44 tons a year. Read that again. One Qatari emits roughly what 21 Indians emit, or 70 Nigerians. The fuel is cheap, the air conditioning never stops, and the whole desert is cooled into something livable. Wealth, it turns out, has a carbon signature, and Qatar's is enormous. Qatar is not alone up there. Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain all sit near the top, each around 20 tons a person or more. Saudi Arabia follows at about 17. These are the Petro-states, and the pattern is brutally simple. When the fuel comes out of your own ground, you tend to burn a great deal of it. The geology writes the emissions. Now drop down to the countries we are told to worry about. India is the world's third largest total emitter, about 3 billion tons a year and rising fast. It sounds alarming. 4 billion people. Per person, the figure collapses to roughly 2 tons a year. That is 1/7 of an American. The average Indian has done almost nothing to warm this planet, and yet shares the bill equally. Remember that because the bill is the cruel part. And then there is the floor of the table. 6 tons a person. 1 tons. And the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country of over 100 million people, emits almost nothing at all, less than 1/20th of a ton per person. These nations did not cause this problem. They lack the very thing that causes it, which is cheap, abundant energy. Their crime, if you can call it that, is poverty. And poverty leaves no footprint in the sky. So sit with the spread for a moment. A person in Qatar, a person in the Congo. Same species, same planet, same atmosphere. One emits hundreds of times more than the other. 8 tons per person, we describe almost nobody. The average is a fiction that smooths a violent inequality into a tidy number. The data has a sense of humor, and it is not a kind one. Now, the obvious objection. China and India are huge today, so surely they own this problem. But carbon does not vanish at the end of the year. It lingers in the atmosphere for centuries. So the honest question is not who emits the most now, it is who put the carbon up there in the first place. And that map looks entirely different. Over all of history, the largest emitter is not China. It is the United States. Since the Industrial Revolution, America has released around 430 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That is about a quarter of every molecule humanity has ever burned from fossil fuels. China, for all its smokestacks today, has put up barely more than half of that. The warming we feel right now was largely paid for by countries that got rich a century ago. They burned the coal, banked the wealth, and left the climate bill in the post. But let me show you the country that breaks the whole pattern. Look at France. France is wealthy. France is industrial. By every rule we have seen, France should sit up near America. Instead, each French person emits only about 4 tons a year, less than a third of an American. The reason is one decision made decades ago. France built nuclear power, and today around 65% of its electricity carries almost no carbon at all. So a rich life and a light footprint are not a contradiction. France proves it is a choice. Most countries simply chose otherwise. So who pollutes the most? China, if you count the chimneys. Qatar, if you count the people. America, if you count the history. Every answer is true, and every answer indicts someone different. The number you choose is really a decision about who you want to blame. Here's the quiet part. The people who will suffer most from a warmer world are not the ones who warmed it. The farmer in the Congo, the fisherman in Bangladesh, the herder in the Sahel. They live at the bottom of every emissions table ever drawn. They burned almost nothing, and they will pay almost everything. The carbon, you see, does not care who released it. It only knows where to land, and it rarely lands on the guilty.